Elizabeth lived in a quiet village in the English countryside. She worked at a small cafe near the town square, where she served tea, cakes, and smiles to her neighbors. Elizabeth was kind, curious, and full of dreams. One of her biggest dreams was to travel the world, meet new people, and experience different cultures. But there was a problem. Elizabeth could read and write English well, but when she tried to speak, her words came out awkward and slow. She often felt shy, and her lack of confidence made her hesitate. How can I travel and talk to people if I can't speak properly? She thought. One chilly evening, Elizabeth sat by her window, staring at the golden sunset. She sipped her tea and whispered to herself, "I must improve my English speaking. But how can I do it alone?" She decided to make a plan. With her notebook in hand, she wrote at the top of the page, "Steps to speak English better. Step 1. Talk to yourself every day." Elizabeth decided to start with something simple, talking to herself. The next morning, she stood in front of the mirror. "Good morning, Elizabeth. How are you today?" she said. Her voice sounded strange to her ears, and she laughed, but she kept going. She spoke about her day, even if it felt silly. "Today, I will clean the cafe, bake lemon cakes, and call Aunt Margaret. I feel happy because the weather is lovely." At first, she stumbled over words, but soon, the habit became a routine. It felt like having a little chat with a friend, except the friend was herself. Over time, Elizabeth grew more comfortable hearing her voice in English. Step 2. Turn your home into a classroom. One afternoon, Elizabeth looked around her cozy cottage and realized she could learn from everything around her. She picked up her teapot and said, "This is a teapot." She pointed to the window and said, "This is a window." Then she had an idea. She grabbed a pack of sticky notes and wrote down the names of everyday items. Lamp, chair, table, bookshelf. She labeled everything. Every time she saw a note, she said the word aloud. Table, she would say as she set her dinner. Chair, she added when she sat down. Elizabeth felt like her home was helping her learn. Step 3. Watch and listen in English. Indiana. The evenings, Elizabeth made herself a cup of hot cocoa and watched English shows. She loved cartoons because the characters spoke slowly and clearly. Her favorite was a funny show about a clumsy cat and a clever mouse. She also found English songs and sang along. Her favorite was an old tune called "What a Wonderful World." At first, she only mumbled through the lyrics, but as days passed, she began singing with confidence. To challenge herself further, Elizabeth discovered podcasts made for English learners. She listened to them while walking in the park or tidying her home. Hearing native speakers helped her understand the rhythm and flow of English. Step 4. Record your voice and listen. Elizabeth wondered if her speaking was improving. She used her phone to record herself. She started by reading short stories aloud. Then, she played back the recordings and listened carefully. "Oh no," she laughed one day, "I said sheeps instead of sheep." Realizing her mistakes, she practiced the sentences again. Recording herself became her favorite activity. It showed her how far she'd come and what she still needed to work on. Step 5. Imitate what you hear. Elizabeth loved copying how others spoke. When watching shows, she paused after every sentence and tried to repeat it exactly. She mimicked their tone, speed, and even their expressions. One day, she watched a cooking show where the chef said, "Now, chop the onions finely." Elizabeth grabbed a knife and, with a giggle, repeated, "Now, chop the onions finely." It became a fun game to sound as natural as possible. Step 6. Think in English. Elizabeth decided to train her brain to think in English. Instead of translating her thoughts from her native language, she started forming sentences directly in English. When she watered her garden, she thought, "The roses are blooming beautifully." While walking to the cafe, she described everything in her mind. "The sky is cloudy. A red car just passed by. There's a dog wagging its tail near the bakery." Thinking in English helped her become faster at forming sentences. Step 7. Write and tell stories. Elizabeth believed that speaking English was also about telling stories. One evening, she sat by the fire and decided to retell the story of the Little Mermaid in English. Once upon a time, there was a mermaid who dreamed of living on land, she began. At first, she hesitated, searching for words. But soon, her confidence grew, and she finished the story with a big smile. "Not perfect, but I did it," she said to herself. Step 8. Celebrate small victories. Elizabeth started noticing little changes. One morning, a tourist walked into her cafe and asked, "What's the best tea here?" Elizabeth replied confidently, "Our Earl Grey is the favorite of many." The tourist smiled and thanked her, and they had a short conversation about tea. After he left, Elizabeth felt proud. "I spoke in English without feeling nervous." Step 9. Be patient and consistent. Weeks turned into months, and Elizabeth's English kept improving. But she reminded herself that learning a language was a journey, not a race. On days when she felt frustrated, she looked back at her old recordings or read the words on her sticky notes. She saw how much progress she had made and felt inspired to keep going. Elizabeth's lesson for everyone. One day, Elizabeth shared her story with her friend Jane, who also wanted to improve her English. "You don't need expensive classes or fancy tutors," Elizabeth said. "You can learn by yourself. Talk to yourself, sing, watch shows, and have fun with it." As Elizabeth booked her first trip to France, she felt excited. She wasn't just learning English to travel, she was building a bridge to new opportunities and friendships. Her journey taught her one important lesson: improvement starts with small steps and a big belief in yourself. Conclusion: Elizabeth's story shows us that speaking English alone can be fun and rewarding. With creativity, dedication, and patience, anyone can improve. So, if you're on the same journey, remember her advice: speak to yourself, listen to others, and celebrate your progress. You'll be amazed at what you can achieve.